Well, welcome back. This is 517 EdTech's Digital Instruction Network, episode 10. And today we are joined by Stephanie Bowerson, who is a high school teacher of English and careers at Pewamo, Westphalia. Hi, Stephanie. How's it going?
Hi, good. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. And today we want to talk about student engagement. You know, when we were having our initial conversation with Stephanie, it became clear that this has been an area of focus for a very long time, something that she has spent years trying to develop a system for. And what we found very interesting was that this system actually um, navigated to the digital realm uh, fairly smoothly. I mean, as smoothly as anything does, right? And so we thought it was really interesting as far as how those different components were kind of built and some of the things that she's doing that are pretty innovative. So today, here's some things we're gonna try and cover. The first thing is Stephanie is a Google Sites user as opposed to Google Classroom, or at least alongside Google Classroom. So we want to talk about that a little bit because that's pretty innovative, and I haven't seen a lot of Google Sites use. So we're gonna get a chance to explore that. Um, we're going to talk about the way that she's engaging her students and families and how that relationship building is informing her instructional decisions. We're going to talk about her class culture. We're going to talk about the evidence that things are getting better, because it's one thing to say that students are more pleasant when they come to class and they seem more upbeat, but it's another thing to have actual evidence that they're actually learning more and that the achievement is getting better. So we're going to talk about that too. We're going to talk about transparency and the ability of a teacher to allow themselves to be somebody to relate to, that the student relationship is a thing because this teacher is somebody that the students can relate to in some form or fashion. And we're going to talk about some examples and show off and give Stephanie a chance to kind of show us what she's been working on. Well, thanks for being here, Stephanie. I know that you guys have been going through some changes in your structure, that you've had students in person and that you've had students fully remotely, and that you've kind of gone back and forth this year. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the setup you're working with right now, and kind of how this school year has gone for you so far?
Yeah, so we like to call it yo-yoing. We've been yo-yoing. We're here, we're not, we're here, we're not. Um, I think that had we had to do this a long time ago, I think it would have been a lot more difficult. Thankfully, the technology we have now really helps us still feel together even when we're not. Um, but yeah, we're here for a couple weeks, and then we're virtual for a couple weeks, and then we come back, and we have to try to find ways to build that bridge between that virtual learning and that face-to-face learning, because as we all know, we have to teach face-to-face differently than we have to teach virtually.
So can you say a little bit more about that's an interesting statement. And I don't want to take for granted that I understand what you mean when you say we have to teach differently face to face than we do when we teach remotely. Can you maybe say some things about the differences that you've observed and some sort of ways that you've seen, okay, if we're going to go remotely, it's going to look like this and it's going to be better to do it this way. When you go face to face, you got to do it this way and it's going to go better this way.
First of all, with what I'm going to be talking about today is the way that I've changed the way I teach face to face. So that way it mirrors a little bit more, I don't know how to say better. It mirrors virtual learning better. Because before, when we first started this, there was such a huge divide, and it was so vastly different that we were struggling and students were struggling, and we couldn't find a way to build that bridge.
Hmm.
So that's something I'm going to hopefully talk about today. But when I say teaching differently, I do mean that we have the human factor when I'm in the room and able to look at a child and see their physical being and see if they're frustrated. I can see how they're understanding or not understanding. As a teacher, you pick up on things, body language that is just right there in front of you, and you can't
Hmm.
ignore. I mean, I guess you can ignore it, but you shouldn't ignore it. Um,
Good.
and that makes it easier for me to go, whoa, they're
Right.
not understanding. Let's pull back. Whereas in virtual, we're making these videos, and I don't have the ability. It's not a two-way video. Um, because we want to be able for kids to rewatch these videos
Hmm.
and to relearn, which is a positive side of virtual. In a classroom lecture, they're only hearing this one time versus a virtual lecture, they're being able to pause, rewind, stop. So that's a plus. But we're trying to find ways for that virtual connection so we can still catch, if you will, the students and their reactions and what they're struggling with. So a lot more formative assessments and things of that nature, to be able to do that. And Zoom calls. I mean, Zoom calls have been great. Um, so there is a difference. Again, I've tried to really find a way, I guess that's been my mission for a long time now, is to find a way to bridge that connection between the in-person and the virtual, since we are going back and forth. I do believe that for virtual, you have to scale back what you do. We get through a lot more content together because I can see that, again, that pause, reflect, can we move forward or not?
Mhm.
In virtual, I have to really take my time because I have to assume that there are kids that aren't getting it.
Sure.
And I have to kind of guess. So that makes me go a lot slower, for better or worse. So that's what I
Mhm.
mean by the difference.
And what kind of feedback have you been getting from students as far as how they're accepting some of the digital instruction that you're giving? I mean, you say right in there that you're having to do a little bit of guesswork, but you
Yep.
also mentioned emphasizing heavily formative assessment. So I'm wondering if you've been able to glean any student sort of feedback, even informally,
Yep.
as to how they're accepting what you're doing, how well it's working, that kind of thing.
From my perspective of talking to students, when we are in class, I ask them about when we were not in class. So if they're in my room and it's Monday and it's our first day back, I'll say, so how did it go last week when we were virtual? I would like feedback. I would like you to tell me what sucked. I say what sucked. And once in a while, they'll be like, well, you forgot to put due dates on this. I'm like, oh, yep, okay, I did that.
Mhm.
Or other times, a lot of the good feedback has been, gosh, it was so organized and it was so easy to access. It was really nice that it looked the same from when we're face to face and in person as it did when we're not in person. I knew everything was. Your videos were great. They were short. They said they really don't like those long 20-minute videos. They said those shorter 5-minute video, even if there's 4 of them, right? Those choppier videos are really helpful. So that's the feedback I'm getting is trying to make sure that you're consistent,
Mhm.
whether we're face to face or in sorry, virtual. Keeping that consistency with kids and knowing processes and procedures. And I know that's probably pretty much all we were taught in college, right? Is process and procedure.
And
Going
dress
back to
code,
that is
appropriate
really,
dress code also.
yeah, dress code. Yeah, definitely. We don't have to do that for virtual, so we're good. But yeah, so going back to the basics of making sure your processes and procedures are in place and they know ahead of time what to do no matter what scenario. And frankly, it's made me a better teacher because I think about kids who are out for weeks for surgeries, or kids who have to go on vacation, or 4-H kids who are showing in different states. Why was I not preparing those kids before in the way that I am now?
Yeah.
Why wasn't I? Well, because I never thought of it. And now I've been forced to think about it because that's all I think about. So it's made me a better teacher. I think it's made students um, self-advocate a lot better. I think, when they tell me, yeah, that sucked. I mean, that takes a lot for a kid. I know I couldn't have said that to one of my teachers, that something that they did really didn't work out. I didn't feel that comfort level. So when they do say those things, it makes me feel so good because it's like, you feel good enough to be able to tell me that
Yeah.
really didn't work for you.
Particularly if you've got students who are then able to take the next step and
Yeah.
say it sucked because.
How about you give me a solution? I hear you
Right.
and I value that, but now let's talk together about how we can make
Right.
that better.
Yeah,
We're not going to just stop there. I truly want to feel or hear from you about how that went, what was great, what wasn't great. And that's so important rather than just digging in to the content, because you would have been missing all of that great information that now is going to improve your practice for the next, in-person phase, virtual phase.
Yeah, you've given them a sense of voice, right? Like you value their opinion, but you've also very clearly set up an expectation and taught them the appropriate process to provide feedback in an effective and respectful manner. And that's a huge skill, no matter who you are, what age you are.
So I constantly, if they tell me something sucked, I ask them, what's your solution? What would you do? How would you make it better? And 10 to 1, they give me a solution, and it's usually what I do because they know better than I do. They're from the student perspective, which I love. I think, they're teaching me how to be a teacher. I'm a teacher, but they teach me how to be better. So I take that, everything they say, and take it and try to implement it as best I can. I was making these 15-minute videos and the kids are like, look, we really like you, but we don't want to listen to you for 15 minutes straight. I'm like, well, what would be better? Well, if you could do smaller videos, I could do that.
Okay. The trade-off, kids, is that it's going to be, I've got to push the content. So it's going to be more videos then. I can't give a 20-minute talk in 5 minutes. I can give a 20-minute talk in 4 sections of 5 minutes.
Right. And that's what they liked. I'm like, as a kid, they could just pause it, but they needed me to physically part it for them. Whatever, easy to do.
Yeah.
The second you take a step back and be like, I'm going to model how it's okay to make mistakes and not be perfect. It's like, whew, this giant weight is lifted off your shoulders. And then you're putting the onus on students to maybe, find information or help you in a way that maybe is new to them, and to make the class more engaging and better for everybody. And that can really light a fire under kids and then build an even stronger relationship between you and the students. So I really commend you for that. Clearly you've built this relationship for them. So.
Well, and it says something important to the students, especially with high school students. Like, look, if this class is boring to you, that's a two-way street. Like, if you're going to allow this class to be lifeless for you, and I've made it clear to you that I want to hear that kind of feedback, if you don't give it, in some ways, that's
like, if you don't vote
on you.
Right. You can't complain if you didn't vote.
Right. Like, I've got a blind spot because I find my content fascinating. All right. So naturally, I'm going to err on the side of building things that are interesting for me, and I'm going to try my best to make it interesting for the students. But like, if you guys just kind of play along a little bit and don't give me the feedback that it's actually kind of dull and it's kind of confusing.
Let me know that you don't like Poe. Like, let me know.
One, you've clearly built up a strong relationship with these students that they feel comfortable, sharing kind of the good and the bad, or the, things that need improvement with you. But also that ability to reflect on your own teaching and practice and be able to, kind of take those risks with them, and knowing that, they're right there with you, and you're kind of modeling that type of behavior that I'm sure would trickle down to their own learning, right? Like, I'm going to try something new. I might not be perfect the first time, but ultimately, we're going to get where we need to go. And I really appreciate the fact that you've set up a platform in which students can access content and do their learning regardless of what environment they're in. It's kind of that like learn anywhere, any place, anytime type situation. So can you talk to us a little bit about how you've gotten to that place? You talked about, or you've mentioned that, Google Sites was kind of your big platform, maybe alongside Google Classroom, but can you speak to us how you set it up and how that, translates to both in person and in a virtual environment, and what students and families do to access that material?
Sure. So to do that, we have to go back to 2013 when I started off using Blackboard as my online platform. And then Google created their Google Classroom, which was a beautiful step up, more user-friendly. And they've changed a lot along the way. I mean, Google Classroom in just a couple of years has really changed and added things and features for teachers and students that have been great. Something that I struggled with is Google Classroom coming from a student perspective and a teacher's perspective are vastly different. What I put out there versus what they see is not always the same. And so when I'm talking to a parent, because to be honest with you, a lot of parents, even at the high school level, are still quite involved with their kids and trying to help them along. The parent, unless the student gives them their information, cannot also see, they see a different version than the student or the parent, or the teacher, sorry. So that was frustrating for me because I'm on the phone with a parent who is maybe not very tech savvy, and I'm trying to explain something and they're like, well, I don't see that. Well, I don't see that. Well, I don't see that. And come to find they didn't see that because it wasn't available for them. They were very limited in what they could do. So here I'm talking to a parent about one thing and a student about another, and none of us are on the same page. And that was a really huge barrier. And so I kept thinking, there's got to be a different way that to utilize a platform that would be more user-friendly no matter what leg of the stool you are. Mr. Simmons always talks about our 3 legs of the stool, and that's parents, students, and teachers. all three legs of the stool have to be strong in order for that stool to stand. So when one of those legs was not working, the stool wasn't doing its job. So something that a colleague and I had really talked about was Google Sites. And I know it's a newer thing, at least it's newer to me. I don't know how long it's been around, but I started playing with the Google Sites and putting things on it, and then having my husband, who is not on a school website, he doesn't have a school email or anything like that, and I would have him test it. Can you see this? How does this look to you? What does it look like from his perspective to my perspective? And they were the same, which was crazy. So he was seeing what I was seeing. So mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, brother, sister, student, parent, whoever, and the teacher could all be looking at the same exact thing, which sounds like a very simple thought, but it wasn't happening. So when I finally got to that, I thought, okay, this is the platform that I'm going to use, because I can organize things in a way that parents can understand and students can understand. And when we're on the phone, darn it, we're looking at the same thing. So we are looking at, if I'm saying, look here, they're seeing what I'm seeing. And I found that with parents, it has become such a huge piece. We all know that there are certain kids who reach maturity a lot quicker than others, and parents who have to help their children along a little bit more than other parents do. And the feedback I've gotten from parents is that this is so easy. When their child says, they want to talk about what they did for the week, the famous answer, I don't know, nothing. That's the famous answer, right? Like, what'd you do? I don't know. So they can pull up the website and it tells them what they did, and it has the assignments. It has even my video lessons on there. So if mom and dad want to watch a video lesson with their child about what we're talking about, for example, in careers, if we're talking about check writing this week, writing checks and balancing a checkbook, that's a really cool conversation to have with your child. It's a really good way, because that's the connection. I'm talking about check writing and I'm talking about balancing a checkbook, and mom and dad are doing it, so they can help you and step in. So it's created that triangle, that three-legged stool, whatever you want to say. It's really created a connection between all of us in doing that, which was a huge win. I do use Google Classroom because Google Sites does not have a place to submit assignments yet. I don't know if anybody's listening to this that would be able to put in my suggestions, my little plug, but it doesn't have it yet. So we use Google Classroom as my piece for turning in assignments and discussion boards, really.
Yeah, so just a little bit of background. Google Sites has been a thing for quite a while, but what was happening, at least the feedback I got and the times I've tried to mess with it back before it went through a big revision, is it wasn't particularly user-friendly to actually create. And so what we had is a lot of people were opting for Weebly, because Weebly was a website builder that was just a lot more intuitive to use. And then Google Sites went through a fairly significant revamp that made it as drag and drop useful, basically as Weebly was.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful thing. It's
great. Built exactly. It's built right into the system. You're able to share it with certain people or not others. You could make it all the way open if you wanted to. You wouldn't have to. The thing too, you're absolutely right about Google Classroom, is that Google Classroom misses something that probably you had with Blackboard, probably I've had with Moodle when I was using Moodle, is the ability to simply one click and say, what will this look like to a student? Yeah. Can I look at it? We've had districts that I support have had to have their IT teams build them fake student accounts so that they can log in as their fake student, just for exactly that purpose. And that's really the only reason they need, is I just need to see what this Google Classroom is going to look like. All right. So let's so what do you got here? Show us around.
Sure. So this is what my Google site looks like. I think the first thing that I would say is at the beginning, I've changed the way that I teach. I teach now in weekly sections. I do this for a number of reasons. First of all, kids don't like when they don't know what's coming, just like adults don't like when they don't know what's coming. So for a twofold, number one, I can plan for a week at a time. And number two, it gives students who are going to be absent, or students who are just antsy, I don't even know what the word is, that need to know what's coming. It gives them a view for the week. What am I doing? So whether we're in person or whether we are online, I teach in weekly increments, and I call these things checklists. So I do a weekly checklist. Actually, I have one already loaded. Sorry. Let me pull that one up instead. So here's my weekly checklist, and it looks like this. And it has every day that we're in school here. It has my I can statement here. And then it has the examples, the instructions, the videos, the assignments, everything located on this right-hand side. What I pull this up at the beginning of every class. So if they're coming into my class on Monday, they come in, I sit down, I have this pulled up, I go over my I can statement, I can understand and explain the 5 pillars of transcendentalism, and then we begin class. I encourage them to pull this up as well. Again, that process and procedure. So when they sit down at home virtually to start my class, the first thing they should do is pull up my checklist. Consistency.
We got a couple kids in there right now.
Yes, they are floating in and out all day. I see them, and I love that part of Google that you can see who's in and out, because usually that'll tell me which kids I need to email to check in on. Like I'll see a kid up there, and I'll just shoot them an email real quick. Hey, I see you're on the checklist. Do you need any help? It's a really good connection piece. So way to go, Google, for that one. So over here, I have like the notes. Here's my YouTube video for today. If I was teaching in person, this is the lecture I would be giving, but I'm not. So they'd watch the YouTube video. And then here's the assignment that they do that corresponds with the video. It's very simple. It's laid out in a way that if you're not here, you're still getting your instruction and you're still getting the assignment. Nothing replaces face-to-face instruction. I will be the first to say that. Nothing replaces that. But we're just trying to do what's best for kids. And this is what's best for kids, is teaching in this way. And then a lot of kids make a copy of this, and they told me that they delete these things once they do them. So once they've done Monday's work, they delete Monday's work. Once they do this Tuesdays, they delete those as well. So it really gives them a tool to be able to check off. And I don't know about you, but I sure feel powerful when I finish a whole checklist. So it's empowering for them to be able to make copies of this and check it off and take off what they've done.
Yeah, I've known people, and I don't particularly do this, but like I've known people who will create a checklist, but then if they get additional things done, like if they get sidetracked and do a thing, they'll write it on the checklist and then strike it off, because there is something deeply satisfying about
the checklist. So at the bottom of the checklist, I create another checklist, go figure. And it just is only the assignments that they need to do. And I name these and according to how I name them on the Google Classroom too. So again, with that consistency, they look at Monday, did I do that? They look at Tuesday, did I do the discussion question? They can go through and physically mark it off or erase it or whatever they want to do. I do know Google Classroom has the feature where it has the little green dot with the assignments that it's either lit up or it's faded out if it's not. Some kids just don't get that. They don't understand that that's what that means without it being explained. Whereas this, they can physically go through the checklist and did I do this? Did I do this? Did I do this? So I have had a lot of success with this in face-to-face and virtual. And again, when I'm talking about that bridge, when I'm thinking of how can I create a platform that I can look at every day with the kids, whether I'm sitting next to them or I'm not, this was my solution. To be more transparent with my kids about what we're doing for the week. If I have a student on Monday who knows they're going to be gone on Thursday and Friday, most of the time now they're pulling up this list and they're saying, okay, so I've looked at Thursday and Friday and I don't understand this part of Friday. What do you mean by that? And I can explain it to them and they're doing it. Whereas before, and I can't say all kids, I cannot say that, but before, a lot of kids would come to me the next Monday and say, what'd I miss? Did you do anything important? And yeah.
Or did I miss anything? That's I like that question. Did I miss anything? Nah, we just took the day off.
This has truly eliminated some of the need for me to be the leader of the classroom, because other students can look at this and talk about it together. They can say, hey, you had first hour and I don't have her till third hour. What does this mean? What did you do? And if they're looking ahead, isn't that student engagement? Isn't that having when kids are looking at something for your classroom and looking at your content, whether it's before class, after class, during class, that's student engagement. So that's increasing. Or when I have kids who are like advocating for themselves because they're going to be gone and they're looking at it and they're working ahead, that's engagement too. And I think going over this at the beginning of the hour every day, and then I revisit it at the end of the hour. So I'll go back. So on Monday, I'll say, hey, I can understand and explain the 5 pillars of transcendentalism. Raise your hand if you can explain to me all 5 pillars and kind of get that feedback. And then we'll go back through and we'll make sure that we can do that I can statement.
Well, I think you're also like really decreasing student anxiety too. There are no surprises. They're walking into the week knowing exactly what their week is going to look like in a world where there's so much unknown. They might not know what's happening tomorrow, or so they can walk in on Monday and say, okay, here's what my week looks like. I'm totally calm now. I can relax, I can plan ahead, I can look back on last week even if there's something I missed. So you're creating that consistency, but you're also allowing them to trust that you're not going to throw any surprises out there at them. Like,
Nope.
It's all there.
If anything, I take away things off of this more than I add
to it. Mm-hmm.
So going back to this, I know I got on a tangent a little bit, but so that's just the checklist. But you go back to the site, so I start with those checklists and I keep them up there. So if they're missing work, they can go back each week to when they miss something and do it. The next thing I really love about the Google site is I like that they have this list right here that I can break my class up into. I teach American literature, so we learn about all the literary time periods. Well, on Google Classroom, you do have the option to do topics, but it becomes a little messy as you're throwing things under those topics. There's no real way under those topics to arrange by week. Native American literature took 1 week, Puritan literature took 5. Okay, how do I differentiate that in Google Classroom? You can't. So if you'd scroll down here, you'll notice here's Native American literature and here's that week. However, when you get to Puritan literature, here's the major heading and then here's each week's stuff. So it just gives you a way more unified front to be able to put things in order for parents to understand. Because I will say, all right, it's week 5. Did you get the week 5 character analysis assignment? They scroll down here, week 5, here's the assignment. And it's really easy for parents to see the same thing. Or I'll say, hey, you were gone on the 22nd of September. There's a video lesson. Why don't you go watch it? And they go watch it. I have started to record myself teaching even when we are face-to-face. So I will record myself using Screencast-O-Matic or Zoom or whatever platform while I'm teaching in class. And then I throw it up there anyway, because we have so many kids who are quarantined that I still want them to be able to receive that face-to-face instruction as best as possible. So that's become habitual for me to just record myself teaching rather than recording a video that's like, and this is blah, 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 blah. It's just so boring. So to have that piece of humanity in there has been really helpful. And then I have our normal links on here that everybody would need. If you're trying to find Khan Academy or College Board or Zello or Illuminate, whatever that is, these links are all on here for anybody to use. The kids tell me, like they said to me, they're like, hey, could you add helper on there? We're always trying to add our community service hours. I'm sure, why not? It takes 2 seconds, add it on there. OWL for MLA format. They're like, we never know where to go. Boom, it's right there.
You've established a culture in your class that's like really transparent. It's really comfortable with feedback, that growth mindset, the ability of the students to kind of take a lot of ownership. I'm sure it didn't start that way. I'm sure that you had to kind of intentionally do some things to kind of build that in. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the development of, because I'm wondering if there's teachers who are maybe watching this that would say, well, it sounds really good, but like I try and get buy-in from my students and they sit there and blink at me. They don't even want to turn their cameras on right now. Like, so what are some ways that you maybe took some first steps in developing that class culture?
Sure. So first of all, I just so you know a little bit about what I do, I don't know the kids when they walk in my door the first day of school. I start at 10th grade. So I don't know 10th graders because I have never had them before. So when they walk into me every year, it's a brand new culture build every year because they don't know me. So I start off the first week of school and it is basically, let's get to know you. Let's get to know me. Let's talk about what ifs, what ifs. Let's look at my classroom. How can we make it more comfortable for you? Granted, this year has been a little different in that respect, but for most times, the students, I have round tables in my classroom rather than our desks or our rectangle tables. I encourage them that I think that they should speak in this room, that they are not to come in this room and sit in a desk and stare at me. So I let them know in the very beginning that this class is run by them and I am the facilitator. I am the person who comes up with the material and they are the people who learn from it. Because if I'm standing up here talking about it till I'm blue in the face, I already know it all. I'm the one who went through high school, I went through college. So I really want them to take charge of their learning. I don't know how often they hear it. I just don't know how often they hear like you're in charge and you have to take charge of this. And for some kids, that really hits home because they don't get a lot of options at home, or maybe they don't have a lot of options in other classes. So I think that's how I start. Another thing is really learning the students' names right away. This classroom is their room. This is their place to be. It's their safe place. I think also by asking them a lot, and they probably get sick of it at some point, but by asking them a lot, what are you thinking? Or what's going on? Or do you understand? Tell me something that's not going well. I think sometimes we just don't ask kids enough their opinions and give them the opportunity to respond in that mature way. So I really try hard to do that. And it's a tough thing because you got to be ready for whatever they're gonna whatever they're gonna say. And sometimes it's not pretty. There's a lot of times where you'll have a kid who doesn't quite get it, and they'll test the waters and try to get you flustered. So I think it's a very intricate dance that you have to do to be able to allow the kids to be able to have that self-expression and for them to be able to feel safe enough to tell you what they're thinking. But you also have to know that I would not like to go to a room every day where I felt like I was under complete dictatorship and I wasn't able to express my thoughts or ideas or opinions. So I just try to treat them how I expect them to behave, basically. I don't want to treat them like kids at 10th grade or 11th grade, any grade in high school. They want to be adults. And the more we treat them like adults, the more they rise. Honestly, the more they rise to the occasion. Has there been times where things have been asked or said where I have to step in and say that was not appropriate? Yeah. And I take that as a learning opportunity. Sometimes I'll tell them about a time where I said something that was not appropriate in a specific instance. Giving them that piece that I am not perfect. I am so far from perfect, and that I make mistakes, and that I am definitely someone who in the class who they can look to for help, but I don't have all the answers. I think just establishing that alone goes miles, really. I do. But I thought if I could just get these kids to relate to me, if I could just get these kids to see that I am someone that is on their side and that they can come to, then the rest will fall in. And it does every year. It's like being a new teacher every year. And I continuously ask myself, how can I get this group to relate to me? And every group is different. Some groups, they connect with you right away. Other groups, it takes me a whole quarter to get them connected to me. So that not being discouraged, because I know in the end it's going to work out. I've had a student tell me, and some people might be offended by it, but I laugh. I had a student who's now graduated 2 years now, and he actually comes and mows my lawn every summer. And he said to me, I really hated you when we first met. I hate English and I really didn't like you. And he goes, and then I don't know, you just get in our heads and I really like you now. I'm like, I get it. Why? Because they come sometimes with these preconceived notions, especially kids who are not good at your content, right? Kids who are not good at the content you teach. And they have these preconceived notions of what their past classes have been like or what they think it's going to be like. And content's got to come second. I know I'm in the negative teacher realm by saying content comes second, but relationships come first, content comes second, and then the content comes so easy once that happens.
Well, and there's a piece of this that recognizes that like learning is inherently an act that requires some vulnerability. Like, and I
A lot of vulnerability.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like, first of all, I need to model a couple of important pieces in order to get that trust.
Mhm.
Because if you're going to ask any human being at all to be vulnerable in front of you that has any self-consciousness in the least, then there's got to be enough trust that that you can struggle publicly, and when you do that, you're really just signaling that you want my help, and then I'll give the help, and then my help will be effective. Like that understanding has to be in place, and then the learning can happen.
Yeah.
And so, but by modeling first that the student can be themselves in a vulnerable state, and that you're gonna hang with them.
Yep. Yep.
because the first things first, and I've seen it because I taught 10th graders and 11th graders too. And the number of times that you have a student struggling over and over and over, they've tried something, it's not right. They've tried something, it's not right. They've tried it again and it's not right. And then they pound their fist on the table and say something that their parents wouldn't be proud to hear come out of their mouths. And you don't write them to detention. You don't kick, maybe you take them out and say, well, you could just go calm yourself down. Like you're not going to learn like this. Go grab
Get it together.
come
Yeah.
back. Yeah. That kind of thing. But like, that kind of stuff where like, okay, you've shown me a little bit of yourself. You're still welcome here. Like,
Mhm.
I get it. You're working hard. Like, actually, the fact that you did that is evidence that you're bought in and that you're trying. You're just a little bit unrefined, and that's okay. You're 15. You're very unrefined in lots of ways. And so let's not be shocked and stunned by what we're seeing. It's there.
Mhm.
And now we're good. Let's try it one more time.
Mhm.
And honor, actually, once again, and it's not like I want to hear that kind of stuff flying around my classroom, but like what you've got there is somebody who's so authentically bought in and they want to get it. And man, like that doesn't come along every day. You found something that has taken that kid and made them want to dig in, and they're there. So now don't waste that moment because they won't come along every day. And if you capitalize on it, now you've got a kid who's going to be with you. Not you got it. Like they're on your wavelength, and that's something that once they're there, now you can teach them. Now they're willing to learn. Now they come and see you.
So Stephanie, it seems like you are kind of the like teenage whisperer. You have cultivated relationships with kids time after time, and you speak their language, you've figured it out, you've got the magic potion. How are you using that ability, that special ability that you have, to translate that to the virtual environment, right? Like, so I'm thinking of maybe some schools that started online from the beginning and didn't have that time to cultivate relationships and kind of set that tone from the beginning. How are you translating your ability to build relationships in person to that virtual space, especially if you have more of an asynchronous nature where, they might not be seeing you virtually face to face or even each other face to face? How are you building those relationships when you can't be in person and use, the amazing skills that you clearly have in person?
That's a great question. A great question that I had to ask myself at the beginning of this school year, because truly I didn't know if it would be online or not. I had no idea. I still don't know from day to day. So I was fortunate that we did start face to face. Makes it a lot easier. But you're right. There's a lot of districts who have not had that opportunity. So what I do, or what I would have done anyway, is really try, like I said before, in videos that I'm making, because I know a lot of teachers are becoming YouTube experts now. I would say that to not be perfect, I would make sure that they see my imperfections. If my hair is in a messy bun one day and I'm wearing a PW t-shirt and the camera's on me, let them see I'm not poised every day. That's just not who I am. So if they turn on their camera and they don't have their makeup on, cool. It's fine with me. I think sometimes the way that we show people how to be comfortable is not even spoken. I think it's sometimes in just the way that the environment we create. For example, we did parent teacher conferences last week and they were all virtual. My son came running into one of my conferences and sat on my lap and he goes, "Who the heck are you?" to the kid and the parent. And they laughed and thought that was hilarious and we rolled with it, right? Now, if I would have been like, "No, you need to get out," and been rigid about it, it would have made them feel like they had to be more proper and couldn't be relaxed. So I think sometimes it is all about how you model things. And you've said it already a few times. How you model how you are is how people are going to reciprocate how they act. If I was to come into this meeting with you and you were all very rigid and very proper and weren't smiling at me and things like that, I would feel very uncomfortable. But coming into this with this, let's just do this and let's talk and let's have a real conversation. That's how I would approach my students as well. I famously begin a lot of my videos to the kids with, "Hi, all you cool cats and kittens." I know they're all watching Tiger King, so when they hear that and they laugh, they can relate to me. They know, oh, she's watched Tiger King, whether I have or not. Who knows? But I'll ask the kids to send me in a discussion post one day for an assignment. I'll say, "Hey, we're talking about this, but could you guys also at the end of your post, could you send me a song request? I need new music for my playlist, for my workout list. And they'll send me those songs. I will listen to them and email them back and say, that was a terrible song. Why would you request that? Why would you, or vice versa, that was an awesome song. Having that communication, even if it's not face to face, you learn a lot about people through how they make you feel. And so I do whatever I can to make them feel like they're comfortable. And by doing that, sometimes I got to make a fool out of myself. But they're already so worried about their image that if I can take any distraction away from that and make me the goofy person, then I'll do that, you know? So I think it's a lot of just remembering, how are you projecting yourself, and you want them to mirror how you act. So if you act comfortable, they're going to be comfortable.
The way that you set your class up is really quite similar to the way I did my class. You know, in a lot of ways, you recognize that, like, is it my goal to get the kids all to like me? No, it's my goal for them to learn math. But if they come into an environment that they're comfortable in and are, like, look forward to being in, they're more likely to buy in. And so you have to, it's a tricky line to walk, but it's worth figuring out how to walk that line. Yeah. Especially with high school kids, because there were a couple of sections that I just like, the community that existed in there, because the kids all got so comfortable with each other and with me and with the content. You know, that community really drove the ability we had to have conversations around the content. And I wasn't a particularly, like, I don't know, affectual teacher. Like, we didn't spend a ton of time digging into each other's, like, non-school worlds, but it was a lot of math every day. We'd start math from the beginning, we'd go math to the end, but I was consistent, we were authentic. And oh, by the way, I might be singing to myself the whole time you're working. And that kind of stuff just breaks down the tension. Like, Shaver, what are you singing? And I was like, that was Weird Al. Can you play that? No, because if I play it, then you won't hear me sing it. I'm really interested and engaged by the ideas that you share. And I think part of what we're exploring with the way that you describe your system is that we're observing learning communities and their flexibility. And when you have an instructional system that is too heavily dependent on a single factor, then when that factor gets disrupted, the class is very much affected. But when you have a richer community that is built around the ideas of growth, of feedback, of figuring this out as we go, as best we can, of making adjustments on the fly, of open and honest communication, that type of learning community is able to flex. And so the fact that you're yo-yoing back and forth between remote learning and in-person learning, like, it's almost like your community is primed to a certain degree to take whatever. And at that point, all right, we'll learn next week. We'll learn however we're learning, and we'll be in touch. You'll know where to find my stuff, and we'll deal with that. And then when we deal with that, and you can let me know how it goes. So I really think that whether that's student relationship, whether that's instructional design, there's all those components are built in, but the ultimate goal is a flexible community, open communication, and the ability you have to be real and transparent with your class, and for them to be real and transparent with you. So way to go. Thank you for sharing all that. That's really good. All right, Allison, last word.
Well, thank you, Stephanie, for joining us and sharing essentially your recipe for creating a successful culture and, true student engagement and having impactful relationships in whatever setting you're in. I think that is really powerful that you said that this is almost like your takeaway, that even if we were to go back to traditional school, post-pandemic, that I would bet money that you probably will keep a lot of the things that you've created for both the virtual and the in-person environment. And I think just how that seamless transition for your students, the knowing what to expect, and creating a culture that's comfortable for both students and families is clearly a very strong recipe for success. So thanks for joining us and sharing.
Christy, last word.
I agree. I feel like there were some key components that I pulled out of this that, I know we talked a lot about secondary level and high school, but I think, the key things of student and teacher ability to take each other's perspective on things, building, a community in which we problem solve things together. All of that adds to student and teacher comfort level. And I think those three things across elementary, middle school, and high school are the things that are going to create our students to be more engaged and thus, learn the content in a much better way. We've got to build those foundational pieces. So I appreciate you really digging in with us and for us to be able to, see what it's really like. We're not living in the classroom environment right now like you are. And so being able to hear this from you, to be able to share with other teachers is really valuable. So thank you.
Stephanie, last word.
My last word, I'm assuming that most of the listeners are going to be educators who are in the classroom right now. And so my last words is please, please show grace. Show grace to yourself, show grace to your students, show grace to your lesson plans. Everything is going to be changing constantly. That's the only thing that we can be sure on. And if everybody works together and everybody shows a little bit of grace, we're going to get through this. This is a season. This is definitely not forever. And we have to look at the beautiful realities that come out of this. And I know that I'm going to be a better teacher because of it. And so are a lot of other people. Show grace.
Stephanie Bowerson from Pewamo, Westphalia High School. Thank you so much for joining us.
No problem.
And as a reminder, you can access all of our Digital Instruction Network recordings on our 517 EdTech website, as well as our YouTube playlist, and check out our tweets, hashtag 517 EdTech. We've got additional recordings coming up, so stay tuned for more sessions. And thank you so much for joining us today.